In this episode, we'll be asking and trying to answer the question, do Canadians have the right to shelter in Ontario? Hello friends and welcome to another episode of Ontario Permaculture. I'm Bryce Murph'Ariens.
And I'm Misty Murph'Ariens.
In this episode, we'll be asking and trying to answer the question, do Canadians have the right to shelter in Ontario?
Now, the reason we bring this up is because very soon we will be going to court. Okay, so Bryce had to go and water the moose because they were really thirsty, but we've been trying to get this video going for such a long time. So I'm just going to take over from here and I'm going to get the points going and we'll see Bryce back at the end because he's adorable. Also, we have quite a lot more to say. We took a really long time making this legals thing. I think a lot of people are interested. What's going on with your story specifically? And it is unclear how much we're allowed to share from court until after it is concluded. And not only that, it is hours and hours and hours just to get through one single story. So for this video, we're just going to focus on what is applicable to all, and we'll get more into the nitty-gritty in a future video. We're going to be going to court next week, in fact, in several days. So hopefully we have more to tell you then, and I do so hope it is good news. I hope that you will join me in wishing and hoping and praying for good news in the near future. Okay? On to the video. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is an important law that supersedes all the other laws in Canada. It's the check and balance upon all the laws to make sure that when we write laws in Canada, it upholds the values that we have for what makes a law just and virtuous and actually enforceable. In the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, in Section 7, it says, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. In order for a principle to be a principle of fundamental justice, a rule or principle must be, 1, a legal principle, 2, about which there is significant societal consensus that it is fundamental to the way in which the legal system ought to fairly operate, and 3, it must be identified with sufficient precision to yield a manageable standard against which to measure deprivations of life, liberty, or security of the person. So in Canada, we wrote this Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and it came into effect, but the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is said to be a living tree. And that means that they understood when they wrote it that what would need to happen was that many cases would have to come before the courts and be ruled upon with this new legislation in place, and they would have to consider and adjust and add new things to the way the Charter of Rights and Freedoms would be enacted. And that is why it takes time for it to have clear definitions of what these things mean. Now, in Canada, we have a huge problem with homelessness. Homelessness has reached rather epic proportions here in Canada. It is a growing problem, and there don't seem to be any clear ways in which we are actually addressing this problem in Canada. We've got lots of policies in place, and there's lots of agencies and people out there blessedly putting out the little fires that come with this major problem, but it is identified as being systemic. Now, this is what has come to our attention going down this rabbit hole. We didn't set out to end homelessness, nor could it really reasonably be
ended per se, but we were looking for a way to navigate what do people do when they just don't have a lot of money and they're not in a position to take on a huge amount of debt, but they want to live in a home, or they need to live in a home, and they need to live in a specific kind of home. So we took it upon ourselves to find something that would solve our issue, and then realizing that it did bring about better health and better financial freedom and more opportunities for us to pursue our educational desires and our life goals, we wanted to find a way to open it up to other people. We were very transparent throughout our process, making a website and sharing openly in newspapers and periodicals locally to say what we were doing, what we were discovering it, and really taking on the creation of our home and the building of our permaculture farmstead as an experiment, a scientific experiment, to see if we could create something that was reproducible, create something that might have strategies for other people who were underhoused or not adequately housed or not securely enough housed. And I personally found a lot of relief from my chemical sensitivities from not being in the city all the time, which we could only do because we had this home in the country. We couldn't afford to just buy a home in the country. So this making a home for ourselves was the way in which to get that. So, fresh air and exercise and growing our own vegetables and things like that was a necessary part in the step, and is all tied to the house because we couldn't have that unless we had a home to live from. The affordability of this style of house was really the major discovery. We built our house for the original one that we could live in as soon as we started building was less than $500. And after building all of the accessory parts and things to accommodate all of the necessities of life and having a homestead, it was $1,000, and then minor upkeep year to year, and the upkeep can be renewable and done by ourselves and things like that. These are all really important to make it affordable. Now, the current figures on homelessness in Canada is about, I think it's 250,000 people every year experiencing homelessness, but that it is noted in the literature that if you consider emergency room data from the hospitals, that figure is much higher, meaning that there are problems of underhousing and not full homelessness as we understand it, people sitting on the street begging for coins, but rather people couch surfing and people moving from place to place and not being able to have a secure job because they can't secure housing. This has all gotten much worse with COVID insecurities, with the housing market going so much up. Years ago, I understood, a good, comfortable family home was about $200,000 in this province. You could get something nice for that amount. Now, I think the average house price in our township is sitting around $850,000 for an average house, and plus or minus, and certainly that's not including farmland and things to go with it. So all of these things, they need addressing, and to think that $1,000 per family could possibly alleviate that, this is something that we need to talk about. This is something we need to address. Now, funny enough, during the time in which we have been in this lawsuit with our township trying to decide whether or not our house is safe to reside in without a building permit being issued, or if the building permit is to be issued, whether or not we need to pay large sums of money to get that building permit issued so that it can be considered safe. During that time, there has been an affordable attainable housing committee brought forth in our township. And of course, having the information that we had, we sent forward information to that committee. And their answer was basically, well, are you an engineer? And we said, no. And they said, well, are you a developer? No, we just have these ideas that we practice out, and it makes it extremely affordable, like more affordable than anyone has even thought possible, um, they didn't really care about the information. And to my understanding, it would have made a lot of sense if an engineer or a developer were required for this information to be valuable, that they might take the information and find an engineer who could put their name behind it, who could lead the way, or at least begin investigating the information that we brought forward so that we can start to make headway. But that doesn't seem the way that it is going. And I think, like many of the problems that I understood in my youth, where I thought that a solution was needed to a problem, I'm now coming to understand, the older I get and the more experience I have, that the solutions are all there. What is needed is a priority for the people who enact the solutions to actually do so. And that's the thing that may be changing now. All of the civil rights movements that I'm aware of here in North America in the modern age have been basically people living without adequate rights and getting increasingly uncomfortable about living without having adequate rights, and eventually it coming to a point, breaking point, a critical mass where the people just couldn't take it anymore. If you look at for example, the segregation laws, that this was just, it's just the way that it is. It just has to be that way. We've always done it that way. It's important that we do it that way, blah, 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 until finally enough cases go through the courts where they said, no, we're not going to take it anymore. And then many brave people banded together and took on even more discomfort to really make it clear, no, we're not going to comply anymore. We're not going to make it easy for you to make it hard for us anymore. And eventually, over a period of time, enough discord and discontent came along and it brought it to a head. And bringing it to a head brought us to a new way of thinking. And even after the laws were changed, it took time for people to integrate that this was the new reality. And now looking back, it seems ridiculous to someone from my generation to think that someone of a different race should have different rights and opportunities than I do. That's just ridiculous. But there was a time when that wasn't what everyone understood. And now I think that that's the way that housing is. Now, I don't think that the government really can or even should be, buying houses for people or manipulating housing markets to make them much cheaper or more affordable. Certainly in Canada, they're just trying to build so many houses that we have so many opportunities, and you can just go get a mortgage if you need to. That is going to leave people out. There are people who can't afford mortgages. There are people which mortgages would not suit, people who are not up for long-term employment in a system that would be paying them a lot. It just can't house those people. But there have been lots of initiatives that can show that we can upgrade the standard of living for the people who are inadequately housed one step further. And I propose that what we have done with our home, which I believe to be a legal approach, if you look at all the different technicalities that come up in our case, you could see that there could be a way of altering the building code and the Building Code Act and the way that it is being enforced to basically allow for those who are presently in the cracks of society to have an exemption where you can build something for yourself if you are in dire need. In our case, what comes up in the legal precedent, increasingly more recently, is things have gone to court where townships are trying to clear out their homeless problem. And the courts have basically said, if you don't have homeless beds in homeless shelters to send these people to, if we don't have enough safety nets for these people, you just can't throw them out of the boat. You just can't push them off somewhere. This is just going to create a problem elsewhere. And that does threaten the security of person for those individuals. So it all comes down to how many beds are there. Well, I know personally that that is not adequate. People need to exist in the daytime as well. And especially here in Canada, where being outside for extended periods of time, like daylight hours in the wintertime, can spell death anyways. And there are not places for people who don't have a shower to be during the daytime where other people want them to be, that gives them adequate safety. Not to even mention the fact that, you know, if they have to take down their overnight shelter, which has now been shown in British Columbia to be a protected right for security of the person, that you should have access to at least a tarp, because if you are outside without a tarp, you will most definitely die of exposure, that at least you get the tarp. Well, if all of your earthly possessions and your roof have to be deconstructed in the morning, carried around with you wherever you're going, and then reconstructed in the evening, that's not sustainable. Those people who probably already have physical and mental difficulties, and that is what is putting them in that situation, would be stressed to overwhelm by that. And obviously, we don't want homeless encampments in public parks, but here in Canada, we are blessed with huge amounts of land, and unfortunately it's privately owned, but we are treating it like, oh well, we have to preserve all of these grassy margins and public parks and baseball diamonds and skating parks and all these things, you know, for the good of the taxpayers. And I don't disagree. I make use of public spaces for recreation with my family, and obviously I don't want homeless encampments to be there and have the discomfort of seeing their discomfort, and the discomfort of perhaps being around people who have mental and physical disabilities. But the fact of the matter is, their need is greater than mine. Our need to play baseball in a public park is not at all more important than people's need for shelter. And the fact is, there doesn't need to be competition. In Waterloo versus Persons, the Waterloo region was trying to evict people from the homeless encampment in a disused parking lot, and there was no need to balance the needs of the users of this property with the needs of the people who were encamping there. And so the judge in that case decided, no, you can't kick them out because they have no other place to go, and you don't need that. The way that it reads to me is sort of a, how dare you? But that's how we would feel. Now, there have been other townships that have brought forward similar concerns, and depending on, are they taking space in public parks, or is it just public land? Basically, it comes down to the fact that we have the space. We have the solution, we have the materials. The building industry is constantly wasting materials that do have a second life. Our entire home, aside from the natural materials that we ourselves collected, which is in abundance here in Canada, there are numerous materials that are available. Every time people renovate, every time things are taken down, there are materials that can be reused. There is space for us to build for people who need more housing. And there are solutions possible to give space and resources so that we can make this shelter. But we need to decide that it's a priority. The people who are enforcing the laws need to understand that human life is more important than preserving property rights and public park aesthetics.
So in conclusion, do Canadians have the right to shelter? Absolutely. You have the right to shelter your person. You have as much right as a black man has the right to sit at a lunch counter next to a white man. The only question is the legal system right now in 1945, or is it in 2024? And that's what we'll find out very soon.
So thank you so much for watching this video. I'd like to take a moment to ask you that if you're so inclined, please share this video. This is a very big topic that truly needs discussion in the open. And I'd very much like to get that conversation started. So please, perhaps you could start that conversation with your friends. Also, if you take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. This will truly help us in the future, help our channel bring more content to you, and help us do better and to thrive and succeed as a channel. I'll take a moment right now to give a huge thank you to all of our Patreon patrons and all of our GoFundMe funders. Thank you so much for the money that you're providing to this channel. It is truly a boon and a contribution that you allow us to continue to providing this content for you.
It's been especially helpful to have the support of you folks while we're going through these difficult times. Mostly it's been very heavy on the soul, and it's just really good to know that we're not alone. There are other people out there who see us and appreciate what we're doing, what we're putting forward, and we really, really appreciate you showing your support.
We are entirely self-funded except for the Patreon and the GoFundMe, and we really do enjoy bringing this content to you. So if you'd like, please join those groups, and we'd love to see you there. And so thank you so much for joining us in this video. We do hope you join us in future. We intend to come back with more legals because we will have a unique perspective in the upcoming days that we can share with you. And I think you might like to hear some of that. So indeed, come back and join us again soon.
Until next time.